Flea weights are a weird class. 75 grams is really not a lot to be doing anything with any kind of combat robot. I have built one semi-successfully in the past and then attempted to find a different drive setup, and not exactly satisfied with how heavy this was. I have gone through and I've bought just a ton of different options for drive setups and stuff to try and get something Flea weight related working. And what I've kind of settled on, or what I got to, was that this type of drive setup with thin axles would be really good. However, doing this, I'm kind of reinventing the wheel, because all I'm doing is I'm taking a small motor through plastic gearing into an output wheel, and there's something that's already done that. HexBugs. If we have a look inside Witch Doctor, you'll see that our front wheels are driven, and they are driven by a plastic gear train. So these things are weighty. They're not a combat robot in and of themselves, because they are a little bit too heavy, but also because the receiver module and everything runs on infrared light, which is not fully combat legal. However, the chassis and the drivetrains off of these could actually come in quite handy. So I've got two here. I actually have more than this, but these are the two that I think are going to potentially make actual proper Flea weight. So we've got a Witch Doctor and we've got a Tombstone here, which, if I remember correctly, yes, the tops come off as well. So once again, this is just a plastic gear train in here. The one thing I don't like about these is the wheel setup on them. The wheels have a parting line across them, which is where they'll actually drive on, which isn't a great contact patch, but we might be able to fix that later. So for now though, what I want to try and do is strip these down to their core elements. I've also already taken batteries out of them. We'll strip them down to their core elements and see how much weight is in each one. Cool, so there is Witch Doctor and Tombstone in similar states of disarray. And I think looking at this, it's likely that Tombstone is going to be lighter because it has a smaller surface area. I've also kind of removed everything other than all the drive motors and the weapon motors, mostly because I just don't want to cut those off just yet until I know which way I'm going with this. Because the other one I do want to keep actually working, although I will probably be buying replacements for these later on. So let us get some weight going. So that's a zeroed out scale, and Witch Doctor currently sits in at 50 grams. Okay, so that gives us 25 grams to put a weapon, a battery, and ESC combo stuff, all of the electronics in there. Reminding us, of course, that we'll lose a motor and a circuit board out of here, so 50 grams is probably more like, hopefully 45? I don't know. I don't know how heavy these motors are, actually. And Tombstone is at 52. Huh. Would you look at that? Tombstone is actually heavier than Witch Doctor. That is surprising to me. I would have thought the Witch Doctor would have been the heavier of the two, but no. Let's have a look at what we can do with these though. So Witch Doctor obviously is fairly set up for being a vert. It would do a nice front wheel drive vert out of this, I think. It shouldn't be too difficult actually. All we'd need is new uprights and a different weapon motor in there. Yeah, that would actually be a fairly easy thing to do. We could also maybe make it into a lifter too, with a heavier gear train on this front section and make a flippy lifter out of it. that could be nice and doable. Tombstone. I'm not too sure about Tombstone because of course the front end we've taken off entirely because this thing, I don't think it's sturdy enough to hold an actual proper steel weapon of some kind. And also I'd probably need to put bearings into it, which I don't really want to do. So all of this stuff was just discarded as excess weight. So then we're left with this chassis. One thing that's standing out to me is the back section of the chassis. We could almost go upside down and run an undercutter blade under there, I think. That could be kind of cool. You know, I'm kind of into that actually. I've changed my mind. We're going Annie, are you okay? Because Tombstone does weigh more and there's no real getting around that. And this is going to be a Flea weight and we're kind of close on weight as it is. So getting the lighter chassis out is always going to be a good idea. So the one thing about this though is that this gap in the front here isn't actually wide enough for what I want. So I want to make this into an undercutter. I've kind of just got undercutters on the brain for this particular build. So I want to turn this into an undercutter. And weirdly, it's going to kind of look a little bit like Annie almost, although the wheels are going to be in a different placement. However, none of the motors that I have will fit inside this gap. So I printed out a little drill guide that slots nicely in here. And you can then, or I could then drill down through the plastic walls. However, this seems more than a little sketchy. So instead we're going to Dremel out some of this space so that we can put a thing in there. Then we're going to need to get rid of this circuit board because that is in the way. Chassis is now fully modified. So I've cut a hole in through here so we can actually jam our electronics into what was the battery bay. I've left the battery door cover completely intact so we can actually use that to get in and charge batteries. And you can also see I've cut a notch out of the front here. And that's because we're going to do the undercutter as I mentioned, and this motor needs to kind of slide up in here somehow, like that. But not without printed parts. But also, we're going to talk about electronics now because I've already kind of started doing that. So I've got a tiny 1103 motor here, which is going to run our weapon. We're going to direct drive a weapon off this thing because it should be okay. I pulled this out of Sharky because I actually realized I had two different speed motors in Sharky, which is why Sharky was moving weirdly the last time we looked at Sharky. So that's the weapon motor. The weapon ESC and switch combination is this. It's just a small ESC. It's not actually the smallest I have, but it's one that I have with wires on it, so we're going to try and use that. And it should fit in here, not a problem. I have my little 2S battery here that I made up out of other batteries, but I'm not sure if I'm going to run this or not because the original robot had 3 AAAs, so 4.5 volts, which is a single cell. So I could actually run this whole thing on a single cell and have that be okay. In actual fact, it would probably be fine for the drive in particular. So if I need extra weight and space, then this will get compacted down into a single cell rather than 2. And finally, the secret sauce here is going to be this little guy, which is a Malinky, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not 100% sure. I've never heard the word said before. But this is a ESC and receiver combination. So this has actually got 3 whole ESCs in it, 3 brushed directional ESCs, and you can also attach other ESCs into it as well. So we're going to use left and right for drive, and then we're going to ignore the weapon. We're actually going to set this thing up to output out of one of those into our brushless weapon ESC. So this thing was sent to me by its creator for purpose of review. I haven't had a chance to review it yet because I haven't actually had a chance to build it into anything yet. So I will review it after I've fought this flea weight, and I might actually build one of these into an ant weight as well and see how that goes too, because that could be quite interesting. So printed parts are few and far between, and basically that's because this entire chassis is already made for us. So we've got a little connecting rod here that goes in where the Witch Doctor standoffs went, which hold our brushless motor, and then the weapon will hang in underneath that. And then we have some cute little Annie style standoffs which take the place of the former back wheels because those were just too much added weight and space taken up out of this whole chassis and design. So that's it. That's basically all our 3D printed parts. There will be a little spacer between the motor and the actual weapon blade, just so I can get that perfect and make sure that's not running on the ground or anything. But to do that, I kind of want to put this together, at least dry fit everything in place with the wheels and the standoffs and everything, so I can check to make sure that the brushless motor doesn't hit the ground, because if it does, we're in all sorts of trouble. And look at that. That is looking pretty tidy actually. And we've got our brushless motor sitting in under here. That is looking all pretty good actually. The spacing between the ground though, kind of low. Let's take a look. The front is just barely not touching the ground. We've got a good like 2 millimeters in underneath there, and the actual weapon motor itself, the shaft is like mere points of a millimeter away from the ground. But all of that is good enough. And there's the electronics all wired in. Now, I did make a change to the speed controller. I actually found a smaller one that actually works on 1S. The other one I showed did not. This is a 7 amp BO Heli 32, and it should actually do a lot better job. Running the 1S battery will save us a lot of space as well, and as I mentioned, this thing drove pretty well on 3 AAAs, which is around about 1S voltage anyway. So we should be able to kind of start to put this thing back together again now. I need to make sure I get my motors around the right way. Yes, that one on that side, and then this one on the other side. The thing about these motors is the wires are kind of short, so they do actually constrain the electronic positions a little bit with how they go in. And I think actually I might have got that round the wrong way. I did. Check it out. We got everything in there with room to spare. Kind of just. I mean, the wiring is a little bit messy, but it should do the job. I also added some extra O-rings to the outside of these wheels. One, I wasn't quite sure about the grip on them, and two, I didn't quite like how low the weapon was. Trying to actually fit a weapon in under here, I thought we were gonna either hit the chassis or hit the floor or hit both. So it's given us a little bit of extra height with those and probably a lot more grip. So what I actually want to do now is give this thing a test drive and get it to work without a weapon on it. And then we'll talk a little bit about the weapons. So power the transmitter, power the robot. Okay, here we go. That drive side does not like something. That's very interesting. The left-hand side drive side is not great. I think it's just not contacting the ground properly. There is the real issue here. So as I tried to remove this screw, which is supposed to be keeping this top panel down and keeping all of this in place, as you can see, the corner broke off away from that screw. So that's why this didn't work. We just had no downforce on any of that. So I'm going to have to either replace that screw or replace this whole top lid, which I really don't want to do. This is a complex part to try and replace. fixed the gear issue, but the drive is still not good. If you have a look, you can see that it, yeah, doesn't do well, basically at all. It just spins rather than actually putting power to the ground, which means that the weight distribution is wrong, I think. So the way we can fix that is to look at weapons. The weapon I'm going to look at, or wanted to look at, obviously is an undercutter, and I was just going to cut a piece of ruler and add it down here. However, I'm running out of time, and I have actually broken all my cutoff blades, so we're going to have to put down this plastic one instead, and we're going to then test this in the test box and see how we go. So that was interesting. As predicted, when the weapon spun up and there was more weight applied to the front, like some kind of gyroscopic force, it actually drove a lot better. So having a full-on metal weapon on this thing would fix a lot of its problems. Well, its drive problems. It also took a while to get the weapon to spin up, and I believe that's because this is just the motor out of Sharky. It's seen a few fights already, it's getting a little old, and when I rewired it, I had to strip the wires on these, and these wires on these tiny little motors can be a little bit finicky, so I possibly didn't wire that properly, but yeah, it's also, yeah, it was struggling to get up to speed. I had to like get it this weird combination of like up to a good spot, then back to a good spot, then back up to a good spot, and it finally spun up, which is how we're actually able to get any kind of testing at all out of this thing. I will say though, running on the 1S battery, that motor is crazy, crazy fast. So I'm going to attempt to turn around and buy a new motor, get it shipped here as fast as possible. Hopefully have a kind of quickie little Tuesday video for you guys at some point where I cut a metal blade for this thing and put it on with a brand new motor, because that is going to be really, really cool. At the moment we're sitting at 52 grams out of a possible 75, so we can jam a 20 gram weapon on the thing, which is going to be really cool. I think I'm going to make it out of stainless steel rulers, because that is going to work pretty well. I have a smaller one than this that I'm going to cut down, I think, but like I said, that will be for another day. And yeah, this motor couldn't handle a stainless steel ruler even if I wanted it on there right now. I had it cut and ready to go. So yeah, there you go. This has been an interesting little project. I will say, when I've been posting kind of bits about this build on Instagram, by the way, follow me on Instagram if you want to see kind of some behind the scenes stuff, and also get some hints on the next week's video. But while I was doing that, people were talking about doing a Annie, are you okay HexBug, which I think is quite an interesting idea. Rather than going to quite this extent to modify the design, it could be interesting to actually convert a Witch Doctor into an Annie, are you okay, leaving all of the internals other than the weapon assembly alone. So if that's something you're interested in seeing, please let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, hopefully we can get on to that. yeah, I'll have a review of this ESC once I've actually fought with this HexBug, because I think that's going to be an important thing to do before I actually give you guys a full rundown on it. I have some ideas now that I've actually got this thing working in a robot of some description, but yeah, I'll have a full review once I've like fought with it and actually have a little bit better of a plan. Yeah, anyway, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed that one, and I will see you in the next video.